Joining us. It is so bright up here. Good? Okay, great. So welcome to our evening. I'm happy to be here just to facilitate a conversation. I'm Debbie Shimoni. I work for BBYO. I run our marketing and communications team. I also have 4 children, a couple still in BBYO, a couple outgrown already. And I'm here to have a fun and interesting conversation with 2 interesting people. And I'd love to introduce them. We're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to just spend the next 30 to 40 minutes talking with Drew and Scott here about the impact that October 7th has had on teens from a mental, social, emotional health perspective. And we're going to talk with Scott especially about difficult questions that are coming out about Israel right now and how we answer them or where we look for resources to answer them. So before we get started, I'll give you a quick introduction to our guests. To my left is Dr. Scott Lasensky. This is fun. My children are calling me right now. It's very BBYO. He's a former American diplomat in Israel and currently the American representative of ENTER. I love this name, ENTER, the Jewish Peoplehood Alliance. Scott served as a senior policy advisor on Israel, the Middle East, and Jewish affairs during the Obama administration from 2011 to 2017. He teaches courses on Israel and American Jewish politics at the University of Maryland, College Park. We love UMD. So thanks for being with us, Scott. And Drew Fidler, my wonderful partner at work, is the Senior Director of BBYO's Center for Adolescent Wellness. She's a child wellness expert. I turn to her many times for questions. And she has been really a key resource in working with youth-serving organizations across the country and camps to develop policies and programs. She's taught me so much personally, and she's really wonderful. And she's also a licensed clinical social worker. So welcome to Drew and Scott. And we're happy to take questions also. I have a couple to get us started, but if you have any, raise your hand. It's informal. We're just live streaming to a couple hundred people. It's fine. I'm actually going to start with Scott since he's physically closer to me in proximity. And we'll start with this one. A simple question, but has many answers. What can and should diaspora Jewry be doing right now to support Israel? Like, we've read it, we've heard it from all different angles. We'd love to know your opinion.
Thank you. I have my BBYO bottle right here. You probably can't see it, and I can't resist. It's also less embarrassing because the kids are not in the room. BBYO is my everything story. I was in BBYO in Southern California. I apologize, I have to say it. I went to CLTC and ILTC. My father was in AZA. My Bizrat Hashem, one of my children was just here 3 weeks ago for a new member event. And I'll take a deep breath. I was also on ISI. It was my first trip to Israel. And I was responsible with a microphone like this for something. I'm going to start blushing because I see Matt Grossman there. But I was responsible for something called News with Views on a Bus with Jews. And, yep. And I didn't know any Hebrew. I know Hebrew now. I couldn't listen to the beep, beep, beep every hour, which I can now. Someone brought the Jerusalem Post on the paper every day. And we immersed ourselves in the news. And I got hooked. You can't all be hooked, but I got hooked. It was the summer of '88. I can tell you everything that happened in '88. Anyway, that's my story. That's why I'm here. That's why I work on Israel. That's how I got to the U.S. government. That's how I got out of the U.S. government. BBYO is hugely important in my family's life. And I would add in our relationship with the Jewish people. What should American Jewry be doing now? Well, it's a very difficult question. We're at a moment where at the meta level, the United States is doing more than it's ever done for Israel in a crisis. In every metric. It doesn't mean we can all just, pat ourselves on the back and go home, but it's extraordinary. And I worked in a previous government in other crises, and I'm a student of this. But when someone tells you, America, including politicians, by the way, we've always stood by Israel, we always have, we always will, from the time when Harry Truman We've all heard it. I won't say where. I won't mention any other groups. But it's not true. In fact, I'm a nudnik. If you ask people who knew me in government, I'm a nudnik. I would cross that line out in people's speeches because it's just not true. We had a weapons embargo. Richard Nixon hesitated in the 73 war. Others hesitated more recently. So I want to say, I'll just back up again for a minute. At the meta level, there's a tremendous amount that the US government is doing in terms of Israel's security. And in a way, it's relieved us of having to take a really hardcore front and center advocacy role. But it's put us in a different place. We're stakeholders in Israel, American Jewry. We need to think about rebuilding. Right now we're in a moment of trauma and crisis, but rebuilding is right around the corner. And it sounds a bit slogan-y, but rebuilding, I firmly believe, needs to be in partnership. We need to be in relationship with Israelis. This organization is in relationship with Israelis. There's a sister organization. But we need to do more of it. My colleague in Israel, we were just traveling. This is my 11th day of an 11-day trip to different places. Alon Friedman, he's the head of Enter. He actually came here with his children, as many Israelis who are able to travel, many can't, but many are traveling with their children. It's strangely heartbreaking and yet heartwarming because they don't want to be apart. The way he's been phrasing it is that interaction can also be first aid. And all the relationships that people have passed through on their ISI trip, in their exchanges, as you get older, through birthright, you can't just pass through and look ahead. The relationships, all the evidence that I'm seeing, all the anecdotes I'm hearing, is that the Israel we know and love is wounded, and Israelis are on their knees, and the messages, the embrace, the interaction with diaspora Jewry, particularly American Jewry, is hugely important in this moment and also around the corner. And it doesn't mean they're going to turn up at this building. A lot of people are. I was on a stage yesterday with Samantha Cohen from the JCC Association. She said Israelis are trickling in and showing up at JCCs everywhere. There's 1,000 inquiries apparently at day schools. But there's even more who are there in Israel. We need to be in relationship with them. So what we need to do is already being done, mobilizing, going to this rally. But I firmly believe, I don't want anyone to take the wrong impression, the bulk of the work starts after tomorrow, and it's not in Washington, and it can actually be right in your own home, in your household, in your community. There's a lot to do. There's a lot on our shoulders, and maybe it's a little bit uncomfortable because we haven't been used to it. We've been going there. I went to Israel initially. It was, for me, an identity boost, a turbocharge. But there's a lot we need to be doing. The good news is we're mobilizing in unprecedented ways, and we have a tremendous amount of capacity to do so. That's the task before us, I think, for American Jewry.
Great. It actually wasn't really going to talk about myself, and I'm not, but it just happens to be that my older son and my husband left for Israel today, so we're on the flip side where our interaction was going there. And we're really fortunate. My children go to Jewish school, and my question for Drew, so this kind of set it up, was, what about the kids who are less engaged? What about those who are in public school or maybe who feel very, isolated and who don't have that community all the time? How do we as parents help them process this? How do we bring them closer, have those interactions when we don't have them on a daily basis?
Yeah, one of the things, it's interesting, I was listening to you, one of the things that has kept the Jewish people over time, right, is this idea of community. And there's such an importance on that community, that connection, that building relationships. And so I think for parents right now who maybe their kids don't have that community or they don't have that space, one of the things that you can do is build that space in for them, right? I think what's really hard when you live as a shook up soda, which every single one of us is right now, fear stacked on top of worry, stacked on top of anger, stacked on top of what is coming next. But our kids are too, and they need that space to be able to process without worrying about us and our emotions and where that's coming in. And so building that space, whether it's driving home when you have them trapped in the car, whether it is around the dinner table, wherever that is, but saying, how are you? And then just shutting up, just letting them answer the question, letting them fill that space, right? It's really hard to do. As a parent, we want to jump in. We want to solve. We want to fix this for our kids. We don't want our kids to struggle. And we don't want them to have to lift a weight that is, in some ways, unimaginable and unbearable that we could have ever imagined. But that is the moment as parents to let them feel and just hold that space for them. Dr. Lisa DeMore talks in her book about, being that emotional trash can. And in so many ways right now, we need to be the emotional trash can, give them the space, and then also say, you're not alone. And find the spaces where they can connect. Help them to learn if they're, dealing with something at school, someone saying something, how can we help them to find the tools to advocate, to ask if they want to problem solve or if they want to vent, right? How do we guide? And also accept that when they're teens, a little bit, we're the sideline coach, right? So we have to sort of navigate that space and be able to help them in that way and to build that connection back to community and that support.
I will also add, from a personal standpoint, I bet 75% of the room will have experienced this, that often it's, how was your day, what's new, and it's nothing, it was fine, it was good. And then at 10:30 at night, every night, 11 o'clock, I forgot to tell you about something, and usually my eyes are shutting closed, but it's being that emotional trash can. Yeah, I'm awake, I'm here for it, I'm ready to listen. Whenever it happens.
And I think listening for those key moments or those key things, sorry, that's my cough drop. I'm trying not to hack up a lung while up here. But, it's listening for those things that are saying, I'm actually not okay and I need you to step in, right? It's listening for some of those cues. It's them altering their behavior. If they're not going out and living their life, if they're not going out and continuing to do the things they love, they're scared to go to school or right? Those are the warning signs that we're keeping an eye out for. And when it's maybe a day, maybe they're having a rough day, okay, I can give them a rough day. But if it's a rough week or 2 weeks and they can't seem to re-engage, then I'm concerned, then I'm worried, then I want to step in and I go into problem-solving mode.
Thank you for that. Let's go back to Scott. So Israel has had many conflicts, and the question has come up, we've heard it from parents, how does U.S. support for Israel in this war specifically compare to other conflicts in history? And, how does, this feel out there both in the media and in social media and in the public sphere? We're seeing all these things, counter-protests, some pleasant, some not pleasant. So what is the situation today, actually?
Thanks. First of all, it's a very dynamic situation, so it's changing all the time. But the first 35 days, I would say we have a pretty clear, straight arc of a president and the grass tops of our politics leaders in Congress. So at the national level, but really the focus is the president. Whoever you support or whoever you voted for, it doesn't matter. The commander-in-chief, our Constitution, our system, particularly in times of emergency, puts a huge amount of power and influence on the president. It's just the way it is. And this president made a decision. If you saw him, again, this is not a commercial, but if you saw him on Saturday, it was the first day, and then that Tuesday speech. And it's a straight line of support for Israel, for its responsibility to defend its citizens, the material support, the diplomatic support in different arenas where Israel faces either numerical or other disadvantages, like at the UN. It's a sort of a textbook across the board, unequivocal, without hesitation response. And it's rather extraordinary. If you had asked me on day 1 or 2, I would have expected, not as a member of the Jewish people, but as a foreign policy person, I would have expected actually something around the edges, some kind of a something limiting, something whispered, something maybe odd. Speaking and thinking in Hebrew for a minute. We support you, but behind the scenes, until this, and it actually seemed pretty unequivocal. Now we're in a position where, if you read the tea leaves, there's some attempt to shape how Israel's fighting the battle. And there's some tensions here and there. The Wall Street Journal had a headline today. I don't want to get too into the nitty-gritty, and a lot of it isn't really for us to see. It's behind the scenes. But I would simply define these as relatively important, but small or tactical disagreements. The real challenge, in my mind, comes at the intersection of supporting Israel and peacemaking. As I teach my students, and I believe it, not in a normative way, I believe it in terms of fact, the U.S. and its support for Israel really takes off in the 70s because of a unique intersection of strategic and other factors, and it's been inseparable with peacemaking. Our incredible amount of foreign aid, particularly security systems, all of this, all the big ticket metrics of the alliance correspond with the United States, our entry into the realm of peacemaking. The Arabs, the short way of putting it, the way I say in the classroom, is in the 1973 war, when the led by Saudi Arabia, when the Arabs enacted the oil boycott, and our economy was suffering greatly. They basically put the question to us: it's either Israel or oil. And the brilliance of Henry Kissinger and those around him, and the one president, and then he left, and Gerald Ford, and Jimmy Carter picked it up. It's actually an incredible bipartisan moment, early, mid to late 70s. We chose a different path. We didn't say it's either Israel or oil. We got deeply involved in peacemaking. We weren't before. When someone tells you we were, don't believe them. And we became sort of inseparable. And we had a lot of successes: Israel-Egypt peace, Israel-Jordan peace, some advances that looked like successes, Oslo, and then turned into very painful failures. But we're part and parcel of the Arab-Israeli ecosystem of relationships. Some are very raw and conflict-prone, like with Syria, like with Gaza and Hamas, like with Lebanon. And others, there's a kind of a safety net of, I don't know what we'll call it, but people often call it peace, but we'll call it the absence of war. Egypt, Jordan, Israel's longest border. And we're there with our aid and our relationships with those countries. So the through line for 36, 37 days has been pretty strong support for Israel, but there's an American role, and I believe it's not without complications, but it coincides with the interests of the Jewish community, the Jewish people in Israel, that America also plays a post-conflict role. And there's a lot of question marks there. A member of this community right here, just down the street, my old boss, has been put in charge of some of that planning, Ambassador Dan Shapiro, who's back in the government. And I hope and pray that we can find a way to both support Israel and help the parties walk back from the abyss. That may not be what everyone hears tomorrow. It's a bit too complicated to put that on a giant stage, but it's absolutely essential. And I'm hopeful. It was in the aftermath of the 1973 war, a cataclysm by any measure, a disaster. I was here in this building. It was marked on the 9th. It was like a day or two after, on the 9th of October. Was anyone here? It was a mostly Hebrew ceremony, which turned into kind of a shiva. But it was in the aftermath of the 73 war that the modern Middle East peace process was born. So I'm not without optimism, as bleak as things look right now.
Thank you. I'm glad you didn't end on the word abyss. It was slightly scary when I thought it was about to end there. I definitely want to open it up for if anyone has questions. I just have one more question for Drew, which is probably top of mind for most parents today. So we're seeing images, we're seeing hate, we're seeing videos, social media, especially social media. Let's boil it down just to the top things that come to mind. Like really, teens are not getting off of social media. The ones that are super evolved are, but not too many of them are. So how do we help them process this?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, my career, right, has been in the trauma space. I started my career in the trauma space. This is no different, right, as navigating as it has been in the past. And one of the things I learned in my career that I wish people never had to learn is there are images you can never unsee. And I think for our teens, helping them to understand that early is important. I think that when it comes to navigating this space, first of all, they need to know who they follow. And that it's okay to hit the unfollow button or the mute button, right? That it is okay to hit the report button. They should know on whatever app they're on, what is the process for reporting something or someone that is beyond the pale. I think that as our teens are navigating this, how can they take breaks? Put it down, breathe, and reboot, right? It is okay, and yes, it is a luxury that we are living here, and to put it down and walk away, yes, it is a luxury. And they have to do it. We all need to step away, right? I took a pause for a minute on my own social media because the images that are flying around, and you don't know if what you're seeing is real, verified. Is it this war? Is it another war? Like, what am I looking at? Sorry. And so, I think that's a big piece of the puzzle for our teens, is helping them both navigate it, know who they follow, make sure they are getting those facts, and then also know when they need to take a break, be able to put it down, to step away, right? And also, if they see something, report it, pass by it, navigate that, and talk to them about it. So often social media is a thing that is happening where parents can't see it. It's happening in a way that we can't moderate it. And it's okay, again, to ask them about it, but it's also okay to just say, like, hey, I want you to know I'm still here, right? I'm still here if you need help with that. And I think just showing up in that way is really important around the social media.
Can I tack up something?
Sure.
Yeah, social media. The word media is in there. We'll take out the social part. We are living separate from the calamity unfolding and the response that we're mobilizing around here in terms of Israel. We're living in an age of, the information ecosystem is deeply problematic. To quote the RAND Corporation, I think, said it best in a study maybe 5-6 years ago. It was called truth decay. And all I can tell you is in my classes, I'm at the University of Maryland, just in a few years I can see students coming in and the downward trend in the basic consumption of news. So I want to kind of lay out what's important, not just in our own lives, in our family lives, for your civic role, but in this particular crisis. Young people and their families need to have news. You need news. And if there's no news in your life, if there's no TV on in your house, if you don't share the passwords to your Washington Post or New York Times subscription, if your kids have never even heard of the Times of Israel or the JTA, which are, by the way, no firewall, you need to find a way to curate news into your life from whatever source it is, but it has to be filtered. News that was posted by an editor, and I'm not old, I might actually numerically be old, but news is of tremendous importance. And in a time of crisis, we need more news. It's my job to consume a lot of news, so I know how to do it, but I see how hard it is for my children, and I'm sharing the passwords now. So you need news. I bring news into the classroom now, much more than ever before, because young people are not consuming news. That's number one, but you have to go deeper. You need in-depth understanding. Rabbi Ben Berger, another member of the community here, the Hillel International head of education, I think, for the movement, he says it's important that we arm our young people with tools and that we have the mindset of explorer, not of defender. I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations go right to the defense posture. So we have to have a mindset of explorer, not defender. And you need to find outlets for people to go in depth. That's very important. It could be a book, it could be a magazine, it could be a module. Israel education is filtered in different ways in different platforms. BBYO, I know, has a major investment in Israel education. So you need to curate and help your family consume news. Second, you need an outlet for to go more in depth. I mean, it's easy for me to say at the University of Maryland, but not everyone can take a full semester class. And I would put it on my shoulders. In fact, the end of this trip, I've had this crazy 11 days in 4 cities. I think it's actually a big problem with campuses on fire that our only option is a semester length. So some of us in the academic space need to find capsules and sort of smaller opportunities. And third, I would say, news, ways to go more in depth. And then I'll circle back to relationships, and particularly in this crisis. If your family is Israeli-American, if you have close relationships in Israel, you probably have those relationships already going. But many members of the Jewish community don't have a personal connection with Israelis and with Israel. And activating the relationships are also a way to understand what's happening, and understanding from someone. We have a program, the one that we, wearing my hat with Enter, that we work with BBYO closest, and it's called One-to-One. And it puts Debbie on phone, tablet, or laptop with Shaked in Beersheba, and they meet and they talk, and they don't have to talk about the news, and they don't have to talk about the crisis, but having a relationship grounds your understanding. At the end of the day, to twist an American expression that I think we all know in this room, you are what you know. And it's important that we impart as much knowledge as possible. That was like we are what we eat, but I turned it into...
Right. No, but I think it's so interesting because one of the things that a teen would look at you and say is, well, yeah, I'm getting the news, and I don't need to read the whole article, right? Because I can watch this Israeli advocate on TikTok in 30 seconds explain the article, right? And so that, I think, to them is they are consuming the news just in their own filtered, maybe slightly unverified, but also, right, in that way, that is how they are consuming it. And they may not sit down and read the article, but, right, if you can take the semester...
I'm not saying give them the Sunday New York Times, which takes a month to read. So don't misunderstand me, but I know it's hard. It pushes against the way they're wired right now. Sure. My kids are watching, they're right of this age. Naz, who has kids that watch Naz? He's in, what's it called, Naz Daily? Yeah, Naz Daily, he's an Israeli, he's an Arab Israeli. No, I know how they're considered, but we need to hardwire. They are reading for their own classes in conventional ways, short stories or books or watching things, videos that are educational. But I know the other stuff is flooding in, and it's very hard, but we have to kind of draw them away as much as we can. Again, notifications, get some headlines in the notification. I turn all mine off because I can't concentrate, but we have to as parents. If we don't, we're going to, it's a dumpster fire out there. I don't have to tell any of you. We have a few among us. I have one kid now in a day school. I used to have 3. If you're in an immersive Jewish setting like a Jewish day school, you're going to get Israel education, and it's going to be in that explorer mindset, not the defender mindset. You'll get a little dose of it in a summer camp. So if you're in a curated Jewish space, we're also, I believe, we're at a high point in Israel education. At my age, we were reading myths and facts, and it was all, in my generation, it was mostly defender mindset. Now we're at this high point, and it's in every space. I know it's in BBYO, they deeply commit to it. So we have to find that Israel education space wherever it is and point your children, your young people to it. I wish I could say, here's the right influencer on TikTok, and here's the right, Twitter for sure is a dumpster fire. Facebook, they'll look at you funny if you say it because it's what the parents use. Instagram, people are looking up, but you're not going to get smart on Instagram. They can spend whatever time you allow them to spend on those platforms, but you'll have to find other ways to get them, again, into the news, a way to explore in depth. And then there's relationships. And if they miss the first 2, and they just have a relationship with Israelis, Israeli Americans in our community, Israelis over there, it's only a 7-hour time difference. Find a way to activate those relationships. If your kids, I don't know if there's anyone in here who had a kid on ISI or on another summer trip, go back, mine those relationships. The counselor, even the bus driver, whoever, and restart them. And they don't have to talk about the war. They just have to being in a relationship makes it all real. Anyway.
Does anyone in the audience know what the average attention span is for someone who's considered Gen Z to watch a video? How many seconds? 8.
8 seconds?
8 seconds is average right now. It's less than a toddler.
No, it's a nightmare.
That's fact. That's just a fact.
Does anyone know the Open Door Media? It's a wonderful Jewish educational. A few of you maybe. They're pumping out so much content. It's extraordinary. Open Door, and it's DOR, like Generation Door. Open Door Media. Noam Weissman and a whole team of people. They produce amazing stuff. At the BBYO conference, I'll put it in BBYO terms, in Baltimore a year and a half ago, at their booth in the BBYO conference fair, one of their creatives said they had to squeeze things. The 5 minutes doesn't work anymore. They had to get into 30-second and 60-second bursts. But at least they're doing it, and that's high-quality content, and they're leading you back to the 5 minutes. And then that also leads you to things that are 8 and 10 minutes. So I feel like a person trying to put a finger in a dam and hold back the...
Well, let's see what happens with Gen Alpha. We are now entering Gen Alpha, which is the generation after Gen Z, which I think everyone's probably familiar with that term. They're the ones coming into BBYO now, the rising 8th graders, or the 8th graders. First, purely born into a completely digital world, so this is the first generation. And we'll see what becomes of them and what...
Can I sneak in a question to Drew?
Yes, and then I'm going to open it up if anyone has any questions.
I think this, I'm sitting here, though I don't have all the answers. So one of my children, and he did one-to-one, he did my programs, our face-to-face encounter for high schoolers. And I've asked him to find his partner, who's a young boy his age in Haifa. And what he tells me is, well, what am I supposed to tell him? I can't stop the war. He doesn't know what to say. I've offered him some scripts and some prompts. What do you tell someone who might be following this advice about reactivating a relationship or starting a new one, who's not sure what to say to someone, let's say an Israeli here, or an Israeli American here, or an Israeli who's in Israel? What should a young person say? How do they navigate a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think for some of so I am married to an Israeli. I have 2 Israeli American children. And many friends and family in Israel, but for some of them, yeah, I'd lose touch. We all lose touch, right? But I think part of what we want to say is just, hey, how are you? Again, right? It's such a simple question, but it has so many bigger things. Tell me about life for you right now. What's going on? And just being there, just showing up, just starting the conversation. Hey, I was thinking about you. I can't tell you the number of times people have reached out and just said, I'm thinking about your family. Is everyone okay? And that little nugget, right? It gives hope, humanity. There's so much there of just, I'm thinking about you and I hope you're okay, right? I'm here for you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. And it's the same thing we teach the adults in their lives. It's about leaving that door open. It's about just saying, hey, I'm an outlet and I'm here. And I know we haven't spoken in a while, and it's always awkward when you haven't spoken to someone in a while. But, just leaving that door open and being willing to ask if you're okay. And that is one of the things that we've tried to teach our teens across the program, right? It's one thing that there's a lot of mental health organizations, but the JED Foundation and others really talk about just ask the question, right? Just show up and just ask.
Yeah. I sort of see you all, but if you have a question, you go for it and just speak loud. Okay, so for those that didn't hear, your teen thinks you're giving him too much Israel education and you're too biased on one side, and what are some reputable and legitimate ways to give him information and to basically talk to him or listen to him about that, correct? Yeah. Okay. Scott, Drew Scott?
I'm going to take that, Scott.
We'll come up with a teen, actually the Gildenhorn Institute at University of Maryland where I teach, which was supported by a local family here in the community. We've been trying to come up with some programs before the war started to pop into teen spaces in Montgomery County. Max Grossman, who's the chair, believed, I think we need to accelerate it. First of all, I'll tell you, I'll meet with you outside and we can talk, in greater specificity. I would say try to talk through sources. What is it about? Is it the content that the child tells you is wrong? Is it the source? Is it something about where it's coming from or what's in it? So pick out sources together. I don't know if I have a sort of an easy answer to your question other than you've got to find the right sources for news, for exploring, and also, we're going to have young people who ask really hard questions about peace, about conflict, and they may not parrot, let's say, the way that we see. I'm struggling, and I want to have a sidebar with you on the side because I want to understand it more deeply, but finding the right sources, finding the right outlets, learning together. I didn't grow up studying traditional Jewish texts with my family together. It was only like in a large setting, like at a synagogue. And I didn't even have like chavruta style, with another peer, as my kids now do through different Jewish educational platforms. But I wish that I did, because I would encourage you to kind of do that now. Take a secular approach to the way that we traditionally address and learn and absorb and debate and argue about Jewish texts. And in fact, I see a flurry of it going on. My synagogue, some of you probably, if you don't know it, maybe you're even your members, Addis Israel, is their Israel programming has gone on steroids, and speakers from different walks of life, and they're trying to curate so much so that people find their outlet in their comfort zone. But I'll give you some specific sources after if you want, and I'll send you my syllabus if you want. But I firmly believe we have to. And when Ben Berger, when he said it at some, emergency meeting of educators about a week ago that the Jewish Education Project convened, I think he just said it so perfectly. We've got to have an explorer mindset and not a defender mindset, and sort of point them in the direction of knowledge. You can model love of Israel and also care, as the rabbi at Addis, Rabbi Sarah Krinsky says, you can have a love of Israel and ahavat Yisrael, a love of the Jewish people, and also care about suffering on both sides. Anyway, I don't want to go too much further, but every family is going to have their own particular way, and this particular moment of Jewish people that I was on the train just now. I came here from New York, and I won't mention names, but there was a CEO of a major national progressive women's group, and a top executive from a far left progressive advocacy group, and everyone's coming to the rally tomorrow, and it's incredible that everybody is setting aside certain distinctions and is coming to sit together and to stand together. So we've got to also we've got to use this moment of unity where people are willing to set aside issues that seemed rather important 6 months or a year ago, and focus on a shared agenda. So there's actually something very unique that's happening tomorrow. It's not a demand, I believe. We're not asking the government to send a third aircraft carrier or a fourth. We're there to be together. I think Matt said it very nice, togetherness as an antidote. And we're also there to focus on sort of what unites us rather than what we passed through. A 2023 and quite a few years before, but especially 2023, there was a pretty big spotlight. These spotlights are reminding me, these are Klieg lights, I think is the theatrical name. They were Klieg lights on what separates and divides us denominationally, in terms of democracy and all sorts of other issues, and those have been set aside. And in this moment of unity, I think we can come together and focus on rebuilding and a way forward. Anyway, thank you. But please, let's chat on the side. I want to give you something concrete also to take home.
Go ahead, yeah.
I have a teen who has seen a lot of pictures of the hostage situation, and she has friends that are still in Israel that were in the United States and went back, and she's very emotional about it and really wants to do something to help. Any suggestions on what she could do? She's tried to write letters, even though she doesn't know these people. She's trying to write letters, she's trying to express herself, but she feels almost like guilty or something that they're there and wants to know what she can do to help.
Yeah, look, there is guilt that in some ways, right? Guilt is one of the emotions. I live here, I'm safe, and I am worried about family, I'm worried about people, I am worried about the hostages. That is first of all, I would normalize the feeling because it is totally valid. And I think helping her to connect, that sounds like a place where having a chavruta or someone that she can talk to in Israel right, and build a relationship with may be a wonderful thing. Is she a kid who I know, I mean, there's various organizations at this moment, whether Bring Them Home, whether, right, the Shabbat Table Project, there are lots of different organizations looking for volunteers to help. And maybe it's a moment where acting, fundraising, there are this battalion and that battalion. Debbie and I both have been in it, but you know, the fundraising, whether or connecting with Brothers in Arms in Israel, who has become overnight one of the largest, right, social service supporters that isn't even a social service organization. You know, connecting with some of these grassroots movements and things that can help you to feel like you have a purpose in this moment. Because that, both seeing the images and in some ways feeling helpless, I think is a really tough piece of the puzzle for us right now. And so being able to feel like we have a purpose, right? Talking with all of you is mine right now. That is how I am finding a purpose in this moment, is helping to educate, helping to bring resources out, helping to put things out there for people. And I think, you know, what will help her to feel activated in this moment? And if it's going and doing or fundraising or, right, being communicating with someone, whatever that may be, but finding that purpose, that drive, will help to free some of that loneliness and almost, you know, guilt that I live here.
I think I would agree 1,000% with everything Drew just said. Have them do something. It's not perfect. It won't assuage all the feelings of sadness and guilt. I have a colleague myself I met on the kind of Israel conference circuit, Shoshan Haran. Every time I say her name, it makes me want to cry. And you have to find the right entry point to the hostage issue that's right for your child or your family, but they are there. In fact, a friend of mine from BBYO, from my own chapter here in Washington, started with his neighbors on Capitol Hill, one of these empty Shabbat table displays. The people organizing that actually prefer no speeches. They set the display up. It takes a fair bit of work, and then they take it down. And the lack of speeches, though every so often there are speeches, it has a certain, it's solemn and it's meaningful. At our synagogue last Saturday, a whole section of chairs were left empty. You can learn about hostages. I hate to think we're back in the era where you have a bracelet or a b'nai mitzvah or some other simcha where you're tying it, because we all want this situation to be resolved as soon as possible. But it's an important issue. The families themselves, many of them have come here. They're desperate for us to listen to them. We heard tonight. I escorted a family 2 weeks ago in Washington. I just came from the West Coast. 3 families were traveling. I was at conferences where they came, telling their stories, taking actions on their behalf. I wish, even with my own background, I wish I could be there at the ICRC and negotiating and have one phone with the Red Cross and the other with Turkey or Egypt or Qatar and, you know, get that deal, but you know, we can't. Hopefully the right people are working on that, but we can raise awareness, we can engage, we can learn, we can remember their stories. The families want it to be high. It's a very complicated world. We all know that. There are many issues, and to keep this issue high on the agenda is, not only is it important, it's what the families are asking us to do. So find the right entry point that works for you and your family and your child.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, okay. Any last questions, comments? I know we're a little bit over time, or maybe right at time. Kind of hard to see. Yes, no? Yes. No, we're good. You're telling me we're good. We have a question? We don't.
You have a question.
Oh, a question. Okay.
So the first couple weeks of what happened, it was clearly all about the terrorist attacks. And in the last 2 weeks, the narrative, particularly if you're watching CNN, right, is about also what's happening to Palestinians, not Hamas, but the Palestinian people, which creates this, well, we're Jewish people, we're good, we would never hurt somebody, but that's happening. And so I'm wondering, that's a conversation I'm trying to figure out how to navigate the inherent goodness of how we think about ourselves with these terrible things that are happening to non-Jewish people. How do you suggest we open and explore that part of the conversation?
I think that we never lose our compassion and our empathy for others. That is our Jewish values, right? That we care that there are people suffering on the other side of this, that it is not, right? And I think that is part of the conversation. As I'm having this conversation now, and I struggle with it, but I think part of it is that I am still compassionate, right? Part of the hostage crisis, I see these two little girls that look like my little girls, and it is impossible for me to look away. And I see mothers and I see children in Gaza and in other places that are fighting for their children's lives. And as a Jew, I am compassionate and I care and I want peace for all of these people. And I think that is the complexity and the complexity of thought with which we have to approach the conversation. It isn't easy. None of this is easy. And if there was a roadmap and sort of here's the talking points, right? It goes back to the woman who asked the question earlier about how do I show both sides, right? Or what news sources can I rely on to give the other side? And I think that's the hard part. The complexity is having compassion. The complexity is recognizing that this is big and hard, and that what happened, that there was a terrorist attack, and that it is awful, and that this war is awful. There is no good here. That is hard. And how we navigate that is with compassion and community and conversation, and we don't shy away from the tough. The critical thinking is still a part of what we have to do.
Great. Thank you so much to Dr. Scott and Dr. Drew for being with us tonight, and thanks for joining us.